Picture this, the sheer, overwhelming chaos of Grand Central Station, right in the middle of rush hour. You've got hundreds of thousands of people rushing in every possible direction. Trains arriving and departing literally on the minute, cargo getting loaded, gates constantly opening and closing. So here is the big question. How does a microscopic cell manage that exact same level of chaos without just collapsing into total anarchy? Well, the answer lies entirely in its borders. Just like Grand Central relies on strict walls, doors, and ticket gates to keep the traffic flowing, a cell relies on an incredibly sophisticated boundary called the plasma membrane. Let's dive right into this explainer and see exactly how this microscopic marvel actually works. By the end of this lecture, you are going to master three specific things. First, the Fluid Mosaic Model. Second, the roles of lipids, proteins, and carbohydrates. And third, a real-world application of how viruses completely hack the system. Section 1. The ultimate cellular boundary, defining the cell's borders. You know, when people think of cell membranes, they usually just think of fats. But check out this typical human cell composition. It is 50% proteins, 40% lipids, and 10% carbohydrates. That means half the membrane by mass is actually protein. Now, the exact recipe can change. For instance, the myelin insulating your nerves, that's 76% lipid. Meanwhile, the inner membrane of a mitochondria is 76% protein, but this standard ratio gives us a great picture of the ultimate team effort that keeps your cells alive. And the most basic function of this whole team is something called selective permeability. Basically, it allows certain materials to easily drift inside, blocks others entirely, and forces some to pay an energy toll just to cross. Section 2. Phospholipids, the membrane's main fabric. Let's break down that 40% lipid portion first, because this is the main fabric of the membrane. This is where biology performs an absolute water dance. Structurally, a phospholipid molecule is super fascinating. On one end, it has a hydrophilic, or water-loving head. Because it carries a polar charge, it happily forms hydrogen bonds with the watery fluid inside and outside the cell. But on the exact opposite end, we have the hydrophobic tails. These are long hydrocarbon chains that, well, literally hate water. They are nonpolar, and if you force them into a watery environment, they will do everything in their power to hide from it. Now, scientists actually have a specific name for this type of molecule. It's called amphiphilic. That simply means dual-loving, possessing both a charged polar area and an uncharged nonpolar area. And this dual personality, it is the secret architectural foundation of all complex life. Okay, wait, this is super important. Here's a question that pops up a lot. If you take a handful of these amphiphilic molecules with heads that love water and tails that absolutely hate it, and you just drop them into a watery environment like the human body, what do they spontaneously do? How do they solve that chemical dilemma? The answer is just brilliant. They instantly and completely spontaneously arrange themselves into a lipid bilayer, a double layer. The water-loving heads face outward toward the fluid on the inside and outside of the cell, while all those water-hating tails tuck themselves safely away in the middle, creating this perfectly dry, hydrophobic core. It completely separates the inside of the cell from the outside world. Section 3. Proteins, the membrane workforce, movers, shakers, and receptors. But look, a barrier alone isn't enough to run Grand Central Station, right? You need doors, ticket takers, security. And that brings us to our 50% component, the proteins. There are two main types of workers on the membrane. First up, integral proteins, sometimes called integrins. These guys are the heavy lifters. They integrate completely into the membrane, often spanning all the way through that hydrophobic core to the other side. They act as your tunnels and your pumps. Then, secondly, we have peripheral proteins. These just sit lightly on the exterior or interior surfaces, kind of loosely attached to the integral proteins or the lipids. They act as enzymes, structural anchors, or specialized recognition sites. Section 4. Carbohydrates, the cellular ID, recognizing self versus non-self. Which brings us to the final 10% of our membrane composition, carbohydrates. Now, these are exclusively found on the outside of the cell. When they bind to proteins, they form glycoproteins, and when they bind to lipids, they form glycolipids. Collectively, we call this entire exterior network the glycocalyx. Literally translated, that means sugar coating. This super hydrophilic sugar coating attracts water to help the cell interact with its environment. But honestly, its most critical job is acting like facial recognition software for your immune system. It lets your body determine what is self, a friendly cell belonging to you, and what is non-self, a dangerous invader. Now, you might be asking yourself, we call this the fluid mosaic model because all these proteins and lipids are floating around each other like loose tiles in a mosaic. But if it's so incredibly fluid and dynamic, why doesn't the cell just pop like a fragile balloon? Or think about it, when you step outside into the freezing cold, why doesn't the lipid fat in your cells just freeze solid like a stick of butter in the fridge? Section 5. Mastering membrane fluidity. Surviving in changing temperatures. So the cell membrane is definitely not a balloon. It's actually a fairly rigid, densely packed structure that flows and can even self-seal if something microscopic punctures it. But surviving temperature changes, that comes down to two incredible adaptations. First, the shape of the fatty acid tails. Think about saturated fatty acids. These are perfectly straight. When it gets cold, they compress, pack together tightly, and get really rigid. If you only had saturated fats, your cells would literally rupture in the cold. But then we have unsaturated fatty acids. These have a literal bend or a kink in their chain caused by a double carbon bond. Think of it like a person in a totally crowded room just throwing their elbows out. Those kinks force adjacent molecules away, creating crucial elbow room that keeps the whole membrane fluid, even when the temperature drops. I mean, fish living in freezing water actually change the proportion of unsaturated fats in their cells just so they can survive. The second major adaptation is cholesterol. Now, I know cholesterol gets a terrible reputation in diet culture, but in cellular biology, it's an absolute lifesaver. It sits tucked away right between the phospholipids and acts as the ultimate temperature buffer. If it gets way too cold, cholesterol stops the tails from packing too tightly and freezing. But if it gets too hot, it actually holds things together so the membrane doesn't melt and become too fluid. It basically extends the functional temperature range of your entire life. Section 6. Real-world application. Viruses. When the cellular system gets hacked. Okay, so we've built our membrane. We understand the barrier, the gates, the ID tags. Now let's connect this straight to real life and see what happens when this highly secure system gets completely hacked. Let's look at a very specific, high-stakes example. HIV. The human immunodeficiency virus doesn't just attack random cells. No, it specifically targets your immune system's T helper cells. And how does it do it? By exploiting the exact systems we just learned about. HIV is surface recognition sites that perfectly match and bind to a specific glycoprotein called the CD4 receptor right on the T cell's surface. It basically tricks the cellular ID facial recognition into thinking it belongs there, which allows the virus to seamlessly bypass that selectively permeable membrane. And this brings up a really common question. If we can map out the exact glycoprotein receptor that HIV uses to enter the cell, why has it been so incredibly difficult to make an effective vaccine? If we know the lock and the key, why can't we just block it? The terrifying reality here lies in evolution. HIV mutates at an extraordinarily rapid rate. These mutations constantly change the physical shape of the virus's own glycoprotein recognition sites. So let's say your immune system, or a vaccine, creates antibodies to recognize the virus's specific sugar coating. Well, by the time those antibodies arrive, the virus has already mutated. The surface markers have totally changed, and the old antibodies are completely useless against the new variants. The virus simply adapts way faster than the immune system can track it. Section 7, Lecture Summary, Wrapping Up the Fluid Mosaic Model. All right, before we finish up here, let's take a step back and quickly summarize the key points of this architectural masterpiece. Here is your mental checklist for mastering the fluid mosaic model. Step 1. Phospholipids use their water-loving heads and water-hating tails to spontaneously build that amphiphilic barrier. Step 2. Integral and peripheral proteins embed themselves in the barrier to act as functional gateways and structural anchors. Step 3. Carbohydrates coat the exterior, providing the glycocalyx sugar coating that gives the cell its unique ID tag. And finally, Step 4. The kinks of unsaturated fats combined with cholesterol act as a crucial buffer to maintain perfect membrane fluidity, totally regardless of environmental stress. So, we've seen how beautifully structured the cell is for sure, but also how vulnerable it can be when its very own ID systems are turned against it, which really leaves us with a critical thought to ponder. If a virus can so easily bypass our most basic and fundamental cellular boundaries just by mimicking a simple sugar-coated protein, what other hidden defenses might we be missing? How does a cell actually fight back once that gate is completely breached? Well, that is exactly what we are going to uncover in our next explainer. See you there!